Hello, we're live for now, as Ayasui Jana says.
So here we are at Empty Cloud for now, things being impermanent. And so we can introduce ourselves. Ayasui Vijana, and originally from Dhamma community in California, in the Bay Area, North Bay.
I'm Ayabadda. I'm a resident here at Empty Cloud. So both of us have been here at the monastery for quite some time now. So I'm sure people are relatively familiar.
Yeah.
And if not, then now you are.
Yeah. So I'm a bhikkhuni of 14 vasas, 14 years.
Sadhu. And I'm a samanera here at Empty Cloud. So this is Monk Chat. So it'll be open Q&A. You can ask the Sangha any questions you have. And we'll try our best to provide an answer.
To the best of our understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some live guests in the audience. And you're very welcome to ask questions. There's no questions that visible.
There's one.
There is one?
We'll say hello quickly to Rick. Hello, Rick. Hello, Suzanne. Suzanne, hope you're doing well. Stayed here for some time. Kumo, Julie in Quebec. Charles from Connecticut. Miss Lee Knight. Manal, Yankee, Luisa, Karuna, Mary. Hello, Mary. Just saw her. So I hope you're all having a good evening. And we have the first question here from Rick. Venerables, can you speak about the importance of solitude in cultivating the path? Aya, do you?
Yes. It's a gradual path, and solitude is certainly an important part of it. There's a physical seclusion and there's mental seclusion. And we start out cultivating the mental seclusion and the training to be aware of the impact of the senses. There's 5 physical senses, and then there's the mind. So we start developing, protecting our mind from the external contact. And this is one aspect of creating seclusion. This is a chitta viveka, the mental seclusion, where we're not influenced so much by the sound, smells, taste, touch, sights, etc. I got them out of order, so I don't know if I have all 5, but you know what I mean. And then that impacts the mind. So the training usually is with other people. We have to learn how to be not buffeted around by the impact in our environment, especially with other people. And when the mind is trained well enough and ready, when a person is ready, that's a good time to go in seclusion. If you go to a retreat center, usually you're with other people and you have someone to help guide you in the retreat situation. And so that's very helpful, because just being quiet and not talking with people brings up a lot in the mind. And just sitting there still for extended lengths of time, especially the older you are. But I started when I was in my 20s. I was a Zen student, and I was doing these week-long sessions, and even at that age, so much was coming up, memories and all this kind of stuff was coming up, and all this emotion and things like that. And I was sitting with other people, and that was helpful to begin with, and then having a teacher, and then knowing that other people had similar experiences. And so there was that kind of a safety. But then when you go into actual seclusion while you're, with an isolated situation, true seclusion, the kaya viveka, off in the mountains somewhere, or if whatever way you can get into a secluded situation. If you're doing that for an extended period of time, I mean, you could do that in your home, just kind of go into your room and shut the door and be away from everything. But if you're there for, I've been on like month long or more retreats, and then all this stuff comes up. It's very strong, and you just have to, what would you say? You just a witness to your own mind. You're alone there in a cabin with your mind, and so learning how to. It says in the sutras that you actually the first work you do when you go into seclusion is to be abandoning the hindrances, the 5 hindrances, and before getting into deeper states. So that's a lot of the work in seclusion that a person may be doing. So they have to have some amount of skill and patience and mental stability. It's not something to do if you have some strong emotional, like you think, oh, I just broke up with my spouse and this is a good time to go into seclusion. No, bad idea. Something dramatic happens, or something, like if something disturbing happens in your life and you decide to go for a month in the Appalachia somewhere, it's a bad idea. So if you're mentally stable and you have, it's not a difficult time in your life, then that's a good time. Once you feel that you're really ready, your mind is prepared, you've had enough practice and working with a teacher to help you work with the hindrances. So at least you have a handle on how to handle the hindrances when they arise. And so, so it's important. Then you get to really. One thing I noticed is that I had a lot of complaints about people, and then when I went into seclusion, I was still complaining. So I had only myself to blame for my complaints. So you get to know yourself really well, and so it is an important aspect when the time is right to go deeper, to get more stillness of mind, because you're eliminating all the outside influence and impact. But it's not something recommended for beginners. It's the short the short words to say about it. It's not. I wouldn't recommend it for beginners, but further on in the practice, it's very valuable.
Thank you, Aya. And I don't know if this is a question, but Esty says, "Is happiness?" And I would say,
maybe
yes.
Go down a little further. Is that
no,
just cut
that's
off?
all they said, is happiness.
Oh, is happiness.
So I'd probably say yes. And then we have another one. How can we control or stop our jealousy?
Would you like to answer that one?
Well, I answered SD's.
Would you like me to answer that one?
So whatever you'd prefer, Aya.
Well, I'll just say briefly, there's a practice of mudita, which is rejoicing in other people's fortune. And so we can rejoice rather than be jealous. And so we have the opportunity for happiness, much more than just our own, successes and things that go well for us. And So if we're rejoicing instead of being jealous, like someone gets the job or whatever it is that we want, and we think we deserved it more. We can rejoice though in that they had the opportunity. And how do we know that we would be doing a better job of it? I don't know. So and just notice the discomfort there is in jealousy. It's really uncomfortable emotion. And notice the times when you actually are rejoicing just sincerely, with uh, being happy at other people's happiness and being happy at other people's successes. And so you can see the difference. And there's the is happiness, and that's the yes. This is one way to be happy. Uh, so that's what I would recommend, is the practice of mudita. Just generally, whenever you see something, rejoice in the goodness of, like, other people's generosity, other people's good fortune, other people's um, wholesome successes.
Sadhu, thank you, Aya.
And then did SD have further more to say about this happiness?
Okay, it looks like they did say more, but it looks like a separate long question. So maybe we'll get to this
Okay,
later.
all right.
And then we have Sud. Hello, Sud. And John. Dear Venerables, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're also doing well, John. The Buddha taught that form is like a lump of foam, feeling is like a bubble. I perceive form as substantial and solid, and feeling is like lightning. How should I correct my way of seeing? Okay. Um, well, uh, what comes to mind immediately when I read this is that these are just similes that the Buddha is giving as examples. But if you say, I see feeling like lightning, it's not that you have to see it like a bubble, like you have to have this perception. It's more that the Buddha is giving this simile as a recommendation for contemplating the ephemeral nature of feelings, and how he gives the simile of like rain dropping on water and the little bubbles that kind of appear on the water and then pop away. So the feelings, they just kind of constantly, we have this stream of feelings kind of raining down on us, and they just are so ephemeral. They come and then they pass, they come and they pass. And so if you see it like lightning, like something that flashes and it's gone, and it flashes and there's a storm of just these bursts of light that kind of come and go, I would say that, is it the same simile? No, but it's hitting the same point, that feeling is this ephemeral kind of thing that we try to grasp onto lightning and it's already gone, right? We try to grasp onto a raindrop, a little bubble on the water, and it just is already gone. So I think, I don't know if I personally would say you need to correct your way of seeing. I would more say maybe try to contemplate, what does it mean for feeling to be like a bubble? And it might be in line with what you think of as lightning. Now, if you think lightning, I don't know exactly what you mean when you say that you see it like lightning. So it could be that that's, you're not seeing it in terms of the kind of impermanent, ephemeral nature. And so maybe you could look at what is it about the simile of a bubble that the Buddha is really getting at. It's really not the bubble that matters so much. It's actually the he's pointing at the nature of bubbles. Rain on water is that it's coming and going. We can't hold on to it. It pops. It just kind of disappears. So we feel pleasure and we chase after it, but it just kind of disappears and it dissipates. And we get another sense of, our senses are kind of like, we could say, like I was saying earlier, there's these six senses is one way of thinking about it. And they're always being contacted with these feelings, pop, 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 coming in and out, depending on what we pay attention to and what we engage in. So really, I would say if you want to see it like that, you should contemplate it. You should really think, okay, what is it like a bubble? And then look at your feelings. And by feeling, by the way, it doesn't actually mean emotions so much. It means pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral experience. And so you could look at that, really start to contemplate during the day, how do feelings arise? When do they arise? And how do they pass? And how do they go? So, there's this pleasant feeling. Maybe it's a bodily sensation, like a feeling that you identify as pleasant, or there's pain, or there's a mental thought that you find unpleasant or very pleasant to contemplate. Or maybe your experience is very neutral. There's nothing enticing visually or with the sound or with the smells. So it's neutral. Or maybe there's food. Oh, this is very pleasant, or this is unpleasant, or this is kind of neutral. And you can see, how does your experience take on these shades of pleasure, pain, neutral? How does it come and go? What is it like? And then try to see, is it like a bubble? Is it kind of ephemeral? Or is it eternal, everlasting, constant, permanent, who we really are? You can start to contemplate that. And then maybe really, okay, you first pay attention to the experience of the feeling, and then really try to think about it, not too analytically up in the clouds, but kind of a concrete form of thinking. Is this, is this really coming and going? And how am I relating to it? Am I kind of holding on to it? And that will start to reveal what the Buddha is really pointing to. Because with the simile of the bubble and the feeling, and he's really trying to get us to let go. It's all about letting go of grasping onto these feelings. So you start to see that these feelings, they kind of just arise and cease. And there's different ways that we hold on to them or push them away. And that will be a good way of relating to feelings, I would say. And as far as form, you perceive it as substantial and solid. Well, it is substantial and solid, actually. That's why, that's what makes, usually, like the body is solid. It's not incorrect to say that. But the Buddha, he's saying it's like a lump of foam because it's not about the physical density or solidity of it. He's saying that even though we perceive it as solid, actually it disappears, it disintegrates. It has this kind of, our experience of form is also constantly changing. So even though if we feel our body, it has the feeling of solidity, and it has this perception that we build of solidity and this unit and this density. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The Buddha can also be aware that the body has a solidity or density to it. That's not the problem. It's more the mental solidity. Like mentally, we can't let go of the fact that our body, for instance, when we're 20, and then maybe we turn 60 and our body is different and we're shocked. Well, actually, it never was. It never was going to be constant, like a solid object that stays the same for all of eternity. So it's just that our point of view tends to be very fixed, because we're always changing, but our point of view is always in the present perspective of where we're at. So we tend to kind of forget that, when I was a child, I looked nothing like this. And when I'm older, I'm going to look very different. And eventually our body will die and disintegrate. So if you see the body as solid, I would say, again, I don't know exactly what you mean, but you could contemplate the impermanence of the body, contemplate how our perception of the body is changing, how when we're more or less aware of the body, or what we're aware of during our awareness of the body will change, and how it's actually not one solid object that's always the same. It's actually a changing flux of experience. And not only is it a changing stream, it's also impermanent in that it will actually cut off. The experience of this present body will cease, it will die, and it arose. And so contemplating impermanence, contemplating change, that will, I would think, would correct a little bit how we see the body. And I hope that that's helpful. And SD looks like has a deep, profound question on the meaning of life. Aya?
You're giving this one to me.
I understand conceptually that attachment can lead to suffering and pain. However, I cannot see how avoiding attachments, vices, and negative feelings can lead to a healthy and whole state of existence. Detachment can cause just as much suffering as attachment. Virtue can cause just as much suffering as vice. Can you help me understand this better?
Wow. Attachment. So when I pick up this water glass, I'm attached to it, right? And that's very useful. I can take a drink But if I was attached to this glass of water for the rest of my life, if I couldn't set it down, I couldn't remove it from my hand, that would be a big problem. And so there's a time when we need to hold on to things, and there's a time when we need to set them down. Otherwise, we cause ourselves a lot of problems. And we do cause ourselves a lot of problems with the mental attitudes of wanting to hold on to things forever. So that's the suffering, is that because another thing is that I wanted to keep this glass for the rest of my life. This is something cherished, heirloom, something or other. And then it breaks. and then, or my friend here decides
Give me that.
that this is his, and that was mistaken all along, and then he can prove it. It's actually it was heir. He's the rightful heir of this glass, and so we get into a huge family feud over this. Different parts of the family, and these kind of things happen. Seriously, it happens. And so
Grandma wanted me to have that.
No, that's it. So yeah, so we cause ourselves a lot of suffering by being attached and not wanting things to change and thinking that things are ours when they're actually not, and not being able to let go. So there's a usefulness. I mean, like, you can be attached to family members and things like that, and that's good. But there's a time, like when the children grow up or family members pass away, or there's different things that happen in life. And so learning to let go, there's going to be pain when those changes happen, but learning to let go helps reduce suffering for both parties. I mean, if the children are not allowed to grow and go off into the world, or you're really clinging to people being a particular way, then you cause suffering for yourself and others. I don't know how vices and negative feelings can lead to a healthy and whole state of existence. I haven't. I've experienced the opposite, where vices have caused me a lot of suffering, and letting go of them has caused. A couple of people are just entering the room, so I'm just waving hello to them. So, and I worked in alcohol and drug treatment, and I saw how, which I don't know, vice, what you call a vice,
Maybe
but this
sorry.
would be a vice, and that's.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're just thinking that maybe, like, if we're virtuous, sometimes we might get by easier in life if we lie or if we kill, like, or something like that. I don't know if that's what they mean. And vice, like watching entertainment, might help us. I'm just wondering if that's what they mean. I don't know if that's helped answering the question.
So vices, if we're calling it a vice, then that sounds pretty strong to me. I mean, doing anything in moderation, for the most part, isn't a vice. If you're able to do something in a moderation, like watching TV, but if you're breaking precepts, then you're causing suffering for yourself. I can't see how, and others, I can't see how that could be otherwise. Even if you so-called get away with it, there's a mental suffering of the concern about people finding out. Yeah, so it may be just the how you're defining a vice. I mean, so yeah, and then detachment can cause just as much suffering. Well, there's how you define detached also. I mean, detachment meaning that you don't care. That's not healthy. Like you could, you can't give a darn. I don't know. I could use stronger words, but um, that's not healthy. And there's letting go. There's yeah, it's real. It's really there's a wholesome way to not be attached, like being able to let go. Just like I said, I don't want to be hanging on to this for the rest of my life. I have to set it down. And if it was something prized, I understanding that it's impermanent somehow. Maybe it'll be on the shelf when I've passed away, but I'm still going to be parted with it. Okay. So you're moving the.
No, I was just checking.
Yeah.
Pieces.
So I don't know if I've spent enough time. So I hope that virtue can cause just as much suffering. I think it maybe at first, if we're changing our behavior, it might seem like suffering. It may seem difficult, but then in the long run, it's really worthwhile. I've been on both sides. You might say that, like I've had a past. So I've seen a lot of suffering just from the not behaving well, and I learned from that. But yeah, giving up bad habits is difficult, but it's really worthwhile. I think people who stick with it find the rewards. If they're like in the habit of lying, I think you said virtue can cause as much. So maybe I'm trying to cover up, or using white lies or something like that.
Maybe lie about your income to get a credit card. Someone brought that up recently.
Yeah. So, yeah. So if you would call that suffering, that I don't have the credit card, or I don't, I I want to get away with being dishonest. So it's whatever it is I'm trying to cover up. If they find out, it'll be suffering for me. I mean, you've got to really consider your behavior all around. I can't just be covering over. Yeah, I'm not really sure how. Yeah, so I guess maybe that's enough. Since we don't know exactly what you're referring to.
And they can follow up if they feel that it wasn't a sufficient answer. I'm sure that was helpful.
So we have some people here in the audience. It might be good just to see if there's a question here in the audience. And welcome to our new overnight, our guests for the weekend.
They can just raise their hand if they have one.
Yeah, but I just want to pause just so you feel like you, because we're looking down at this screen here, and if we might not. You have a question, Ian? Yes.
I have a lot of. When we were having tea time, I really liked how you put together working with the body, the breath, and the mind, but I don't remember exactly how you phrased it. And I also just think it's a great instruction for people to hear. So it might be, I would at least be grateful for you to phrase it the way you did before, so that I can try to internalize it properly. Because I like to be able to look at what I'm doing and then put it into words. Sometimes I struggle with that, and you hit it on the nail on the head. So I appreciated that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I hope that, I don't know if people heard that, but Ian was just asking about a particular way of someone's alarm is going off, in case you're hearing that. particular way of addressing meditation practice. And actually, I can't take credit for that. So this was actually, there's a Master Zhi. He was a Chinese, he was actually one of the founders. I won't go into the details of it, but he was one of the founders of the Tiantai school of Buddhism in China. So this is a school that essentially he really wanted to systematize Buddhism. He really wanted to make it make sense, because in China they had all these sutras coming in that were contradictory. And what is Buddhism? So he was trying to classify it. He was also a meditator, and he wrote these manuals on meditation. And one is the manuals on Shamatha Vipassana, and he talks about this framework. So I was just quoting that. And essentially what it is he says that we adjust the body, we adjust or regulate the body, regulate the breath, regulate the mind. And so regulating the body means that we might, our posture, making it even. So we adjust our posture at 7 points is one way of talking about it. So we have a firm base, our knees are on the ground and our butt is on the cushion. So there's kind of a base there. And we have our lower back, and our chest and shoulders are upright, and our head is upright, and our eyes are looking down, and our tongue is touching behind our teeth, and our mouth is closed. So I'm not going to call all 7 in exact order, but it's essentially checking our posture. So we regulate our body. So we make sure it's not too lax and not too tense and tight and oppressed, pushing up. And we do that, and we develop an awareness of the body. And so that's how he talks about, first, you want to regulate your body, because we might go into meditation and we're not even aware that our body is filled with all this tension that is actually, we're developing these underlying feeling tones or emotions from it. And we also want to have a healthy posture, because one of the things he talks about, and other people talked about, is how if you do a lot of meditation, you can actually become sick from doing it wrong. This is an interesting thing about his approach to meditation. He said that you might get imbalance in the 4 elements because of how you're breathing and how your posture is. Because this is also people who maybe go on retreat for a long time in the mountain. And so they have a more holistic view of the body in meditation, and how we have a good posture and good breath, so that our time spent cultivating the mind isn't wasted. So they regulate the body by checking the posture, checking the tension, making it even, making it level and relaxed, but upright. I like to say aligned, but relaxed. And then they regulate the breath. So regulating the breath is, once our body is set up, our breath is going on. And regulating the breath allows it to settle into usually the lower abdomen. So it becomes relaxed abdominal breathing, which should happen naturally as the breath relaxes. And this, all the kind of tension and tightness and more shallow, or I should say more surface level breathing, starts to become more profound, but also lighter and less forced, and sink down. So we can spend a lot of time just checking where is our mind at by our breath. It's almost like a reflection of the mind. So if we regulate our breathing, then we start to see our mind starts to settle, our body starts to settle, our body and mind start to unite, because the breath is kind of the middle point between the body and the mind. And so we regulate our body, and then we adjust our breathing to make it relaxed. But he also talks about making it even. So he actually gives 4 different examples, and I don't know if I can remember them specifically, but he talks about how the breath shouldn't be windy, noisy, like that. It should be silent. And then he talks about how it should be even. So it shouldn't be like longer on one end or the other. So we want to make it silent, even, and then also it shouldn't have breaks in it. It should kind of be a consistent flow, and it should be very soft and kind of like silk coming in and going out, very silently, even, coolly, and then settling into the lower body. So our mind is becoming very settled with the body and the breath. And then he talks about regulating the mind, which is more or less working with the hindrances. But he gives, like, the main concrete examples are dullness and drowsiness versus agitation. So he talks like, if the mind is very dull and drowsy, you might want to call attention to some kind of more energizing aspect of your experience. And if it's very and if it's very restless, you might want to call it to some very calming aspect of your experience to kind of even it out. So it's all about uniting the body, mind, and the body, the breath, and the mind. And so you regulate your body, you regulate your breath, and then you regulate your mind by checking its relationship. And by the time you've gone through this, it should be relatively holistic. And then you can do this is kind of his lineup for any meditation. Like ideally we do this could be your whole practice, or it could be just the preliminary practice. You could take this all the way to deeper samadhi, or you could do it as just before. But I found that also really helpful, the body, breath, mind scheme. So that's what that was.
Thank you. The word you were using that I couldn't put my finger on was regulate, because I kept thinking maneuver, which is adjacent but not quite the same. So
yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also adjust. I've seen. Okay. Should we do an online question, Aya? Or
Oh, we could, and let's do
anyone else
another.
here?
Yeah, so, question about dana and the dedication of merits. I heard some online that the sharing of merits after meditation is much superior to the sharing of merits through an act of sharing or donation. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Because I've not read about it in the suttas.
You're not what? You
I've
haven't
not
read it?
about it in the suttas.
Oh, okay.
About the effects of sharing of merits from meditation versus from doing kind deeds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's probably in the Anguttara Nikaya. And they talk about, there was like metta bhavana they were talking about in, because I've seen excerpts like in other places, so I can't really place exactly where that was from, but, and it was talking about, like if a person were to give, all this tremendous amount of dana, to the fourfold Sangha, up to the twofold Sangha or whatever, then the cultivation of metta for even the time it takes to pull a cow's udder or something like that was more meritorious. But I think that's when the mind is just really, it's like a really perfected metta. The loving kindness is just really deep. And I think it's also the attitude in which you give a gift too. If you're giving a gift with a heart of loving kindness, it's kind of amplifying what you're giving. So I think the two can work together. The merit from giving a gift with, and also who you're giving a gift to, but what your heart is reflecting when you give the gift and how you give it. I think it's trying to encourage people to have a more rounded life. I mean, that you not only you are participating in this Sangha by offering, but also that you're doing the inner cultivation as well. And I think that we can do meritorious deeds to help us in further lifetimes have the opportunity to really do that deep cultivation. Like we may be harvesting the fruit of the previous lives, or even our own lives, if we've been kind and generous. And so then that gives us the opportunity to cultivate deeply, to help us have liberation of mind. See this, because we can just be giving and have a maybe in future lives, maybe we have a comfortable life or a life in a wealthy situation or something like that. But that's still really on the material plane. So if we're starting to cultivate internally, deepen our meditation practice, then that's going to bear more fruit in the future. Is that making sense? So the generosity supports the bhavana, the development of the mind. If a person just tries only to meditate and they're not keeping the sila well, they're not keeping their precepts well, and they're not being generous and kind, then they're not going to get anywhere in the meditation. So it's not like it's either or. It's like both really working together. But if you don't cultivate internally, then you're just going to stay on the mundane plane. You could maybe end up in a heavenly realm, but you won't reach nibbana. You won't. So so that's a really good question. I hope that was helpful. Yes. Oh, I wanted to add too, with the giving, it's relinquishing. You're actually relinquishing. So you're this is going to help you let go on other levels as well. So during the meditation, there's a lot of letting go. You're letting go of bad habits. You're letting go of negative mental states. And then as you progress through the bhavana, there'll be more and more states that are coarser that you're letting go of as you go along. So that initial just physically giving is it's a physical act of something that you're developing internally too, the ability to relinquish. So I hope that makes sense. So did you find something?
I think it might be good just because you'll be staying here. So maybe because there's a lot of questions, I think, online.
Okay.
So we might want to, because people only get once a week. So it's good if someone's staying here we want to answer both though.
Okay. Okay.
So Julie asks, Dear Venerables, how to know if what we are seeing or hearing is real? You don't. I.e. of another realm, or is our mind playing tricks because it's bored? There is fear of the unknown, especially since the changes happen along the path. So, nothing's real, and everything is real. Like what you're seeing or hearing, if you're seeing or hearing it, then it's real because that's what you are experiencing that. You're experiencing that sight. You're experiencing the sound. So seeing and hearing are real as experiences. And they're not real because they are temporary, impermanent experiences that are conditioned and that arise and cease, and everything else arises and ceases. So I'm not going to get into it, but it's emptiness. They're empty. So, or what we'd say in Buddhism, sometimes people that are less familiar with that term emptiness, they might be more familiar with the term. The Buddha uses the word like they're impermanent, hollow, insubstantial. They don't have any substance to them. So seeing and hearing are experiences that arise and cease, but it's all within our own conscious experience, which isn't to say that everything, like nothing is outside of our own mind and our own mind is all that exists, because our own mind is also an experience that arises and ceases. And other people we can experience them having experiences within our experience. And so what it boils down to is that we can't actually, this gets into what the Buddha called the undeclared questions. So if we start to think, does this really exist or does it really not exist? Is it non-existent or is it real? Is it a really existent thing outside of me that exists? Well, that's starting to create this concept, these ideas of me here identifying with aspects of experience and then other things outside of it that exist outside of my experience. And this starts getting into notions of self, essentially, even though we don't even think about it like that. If we start thinking something is real, it's truly existent in and of itself, we've actually identified with some aspect of our experience, which is why in Buddhist tradition, this started to become criticized. And you see in like Mahayana texts, they start talking a lot about emptiness because that was a response to people who were starting to reify things. Like maybe they said, oh, there's no self, that we can't know that, there's nothing in our experience that has the nature of an eternal self, but the aggregates are real. They really exist. And what they were saying was, well, the experience of the aggregates arises and ceases. We can't say that those are existent, inherently real categories any more than anything else. They're just temporary experiences. And so if you see something and you think, is this real or not? Well, you're experiencing it. And I guess sometimes what people mean is, would other people, like by real, they mean, would other people see it? Well, the Buddha saw all kinds of things. There's a story we read, I or Suvijana was reading, of the Lakkhana Samyutta, where Mahamoggallana sees someone flying through the sky with vultures pecking at them and knives are stabbing at them as they wail in pain. And the Buddha says, oh yeah, I saw that, but I didn't say anything because people wouldn't believe me. So only 2 people that we have record of saw it. And so was it real? Well, 2 people saw it. The Buddha saw it and he didn't say anything. So 1 person saw it before Mahamoggallana did. Right. So it's, if we measure, is it real by how many people see it? Well, that's not really the best category, because maybe no one can see, say, maybe I'm seeing this glass of water, but I'm the only one who sees it, and then I die. That means it wasn't real? I mean, I saw it, I experienced it. So we can really just say, are we experiencing something? And yeah, you are, right? So let's say you're experiencing hallucinations. Well, that's just a real experience. That's real. But it's also not real because it's just temporary. It's just happening. So more practically, there's fear of the unknown. Yeah. So like if you see a ghost, one of the pieces of advice that you'll get that I think is pretty good, that I didn't come up with because people smarter than me would say, there's 2 types of psychic visions. So one, you see a ghost, and that is just produced. That thing is just an image. So let's say it's made in the brain, like it's just in your brain. There's some kind of image happening. And another one is that, say, you're experiencing another being with the divine eye or some kind of clairvoyance, right? Some psychic power that's allowing you to see beyond the physical realm. And both are an experience of seeing something. And the advice is, well, either way, we just disregard it, right? Because if we see something and we're not sure about it, then it's not really worth pondering over. If we're sure, then we just know, right? So like if let's say we experience something and it's actually relevant to our practice and we know that, then we'll know. And if we feel like, was I hallucinating? Was I not hallucinating? Am I crazy? It's good to maybe talk to a spiritual friend and see other mind states that might be arising, if there is something like unwholesome that's related. But really, at the end of the day, we have to let go of everything. It's not about psychic powers. It's not about seeing ghosts, or it's not about experiencing some kind of divine sound, or it's not about thinking up some crazy image and radiating it in all directions. It's not really about any of that. It's really just about, are we grasping onto our experience and identifying with it to grasp onto it further and create more suffering for ourselves and generate future suffering? That's really what it's all about. So if you have an experience that gives you some kind of insight into, say, how we give rise to suffering, okay, that might be the divine eye, or it might be recollection of past lives. But if you're uncertain about it, or even if you are certain about it, ultimately we have to let go of it. That's why the Buddha said that psychic powers, it's a side effect that happens to people, but it's not really the goal. And if you're not sure, it's also probably quite likely that it's not psychic powers. It's probably quite likely that that's just produced by the brain, which is also real. That's really a thing that's happening. So if you're afraid of it, I would say it's good to try to develop tranquility, try to develop serenity, try to develop an equanimity that, oh, this is just sense experience that's arising. It's normal. It's normal to see things that other people don't see in meditation. It's normal to experience strange sounds or strange visions or strange thoughts. It's normal. Is it real? Yeah, I guess I'm experiencing it. Is it worth clinging on to? Is it worth thinking about? No, not really. Probably not. If it were, you would be really sure about that. And there's really only 2 ways it could go. If you're really sure, you're either really deluded or you're really wise about what's happening. So that's why spiritual friends can be helpful to kind of share your experience with. But if you're just practicing on your own and you see something in your meditation, it's really not worth holding on to. And it's not the mind playing tricks, it's just the mind experiencing something that will fade away. That's okay. Okay, I don't know. Oh, they said thank you to your question, your answer about jealousy. I am. Julie says, "Is it okay to speak about such things?" Figured it's okay to speak about it with people to get advice and to maybe say like, "Oh, I'm having this happen, and I feel like I'm feeling uneasy. I'm feeling disturbed." It's good to talk to a teacher or a spiritual friend about that. But it's what the Buddha was, you could say, criticizing was people who they get these powers and then it's very easy for them to become conceited or distracted. They think that that's what it's all about. But we just have to let go of that. Just like if I see someone and then I don't see them anymore, I pass them by on the street, I just let go of that. That's the goal. We can recall it if it's useful, but we don't cling on to it. So it's the same with seeing something. It's good to speak about it to get advice with your mind states, but not so much in and of itself. That's helpful. And HPD asks, I would like to know when Bhante Sudasa will come back to the New Jersey monastery.
We hope at the end of the month. This is what we hope.
It's a good answer. And Rick asks, Venerables, can you talk about how to create a supportive Sangha where we feel enough trust and safety to see things as they really are? Aya, do you have any words of wisdom?
Oh, well, these days there's the internet where you can maybe put out the desire to meet people, or you can go to a place where you already know that people are meditating, and to create a supportive Sangha. So this word Sangha, I know in modern times it's maybe includes a community of lay practitioners that are all meditating together or have a common teacher, and they're usually people gather around a particular teacher. I've seen, but I've seen led groups. Yeah, these days, back in the old days, mostly we gathered at places, and that's actually really nice. But
like today, I am.
Like today, and there's different kind of ways that people can put out a word that they would like. Like, are there people in my area that are doing this kind of meditation? Or because yeah, so my answer is that I'm to feel enough trust and safety and see things as they really are. I would come to a monastery where there are people that already have been working on being honest with themselves and cleaning up their sila and have been practicing for a while. Maybe I don't know where you are, but if you can find some local center where there's a reputable people that are keeping their sila, then I would join them. Because creating such a situation might be a little challenging, because you're not gonna know who you're gonna find until you know them long enough to know that you can trust them. But yeah, I would go to. That's what I did. I went to a monastery, and I met people there.
Thank you, Aya. Hope Rick will see things as they really are. And Chani Cambodia asks, Again, dear Venerable, I am still confused between the word heart and mind when we use them in Dhamma. Please help to clarify. Thanks. Well, so I can't speak for other teachers. The thing with words is that everybody uses them, and nobody really uses them the same way. So it's hard to say if you're encountering these words, I would really ask the teacher that you hear. Like if you heard Ayasui Jana say it in a context, you might want to ask her, oh, I heard you say in this context, and then she could clarify. Or if you heard, Tan XYZ, you might want to ask that person. All I can maybe say to help with this to the best of my ability is that sometimes in Pali, there's this word chitta, and there's another word manas or mano. And sometimes people translate the word chitta, they'll call it the heart. And sometimes they'll call the word mano the mind. So as far as English goes, I can't really speak to that. But chitta, if that's what you're hearing people say, they say chitta, sometimes they say heart, they might switch back and forth. That's not uncommon. Chitta, so in Pali and in many areas, probably if you're in Cambodia, based off your name, I believe that this is so in Cambodia. If you ask people to point to their mind, in a lot of parts of the world, they'll point here. In other parts of the world, they point here, to the heart. They say, this is where my mind is, right? And when we say like, oh, that my heart hurts, or I have heartbreak, we say this in English, right? That's because there's an association with emotions and the will and the intent with the heart. So like in Chinese, the word xin, it means heart, and it also means mind. Because this kind of our volition, our desires, our intentions, our emotions, we kind of associate with the heart. And actually in the Pali commentarial tradition, there are some, in like parts of the Abhidharma and things like that, they say that the Hadaya is the basis for the mind consciousness. So they say that the heart is actually the basis for mind consciousness, because this was obviously before, it's not necessarily untrue, but essentially what they say is that, mind consciousness arises dependent on the physical flesh of the heart. So sometimes if you hear the word heart, they're probably thinking about chitta, the mind, which the word chitta, the Buddha uses it to refer to like emotional states as well. Like if the mind has anger, that's the chitta has anger. Or if the mind has lust, or if it's covered with passion and desire, or if the mind is irritated, or if it's concentrated, or if it's unified, he uses the word chitta. So it kind of covers this more dynamic emotional mind states and intentions, that kind of thing. And then the word mind, maybe mano, it's really used for, it also can be translated as heart. So don't take this too concretely, but the word mano, it's also the basis in the senses. This is used for the sixth sense, which is not seeing dead people. It's your mind, right? Unless you maybe see them with the divine eye, then it might be the sixth sense. But the sixth sense in Buddhism is the mind sense. So just like your eye, your ear, your nose, your tongue, your body, and your mind, if you think of the mind as a sense organ, like the eyeball, the Pali word is manas or mano. So it has a little bit kind of that connotation almost of like an organ, whereas the chitta is kind of this more dynamic, kind of related to our emotional states. But it's not so concrete, because the word mano is also used for like mano pupangama, dhamma, mano maya, mano seta, or something like that. And Dhammapada, that's talking about the creation of karma, the creation of intention. So our intentions are created by the mind. So the word mano is also used for like the active volitional aspect of the mind. Whereas the chitta is more kind of the emotional mood and tone that's behind our intentions, or the kind of mind states that develop dependent on them. So that, I hope that is a little bit clearer, but as far as English, you'll have to ask the teacher. And Bhumika asks, how can I get books on the Dhammapada? Do you have any suggestions, Aya?
Oh, well, there's lots of different translations, and there's a number of free distribution books, and I'm not sure where you could actually obtain them. I imagine you go online and you look and see there. I know Ajahn Tanisaro has a free distribution translation, his own translation of the Dhammapada. Yeah.
Great. And I know Bhante Sujato Sutta Central recently released, you can get their print-on-demand books. So if you want that translation, I believe it's on Sutta Central. Nirvana Lama says, does doing good deeds or having good thoughts reduce the karma of an individual? I don't know if you want to take this one, IR, if you want me to take it. You.
Doing good deeds or having good thoughts reduce the karma.
Of an individual.
Reduce the karma. Well, it's karma. Karma is action. Karma is action. Karma is action. It's the translation of the word. So if you're doing good things, then you're doing good karma. It's good action. The result, the vipaka, is a different thing than the karma. Karma is the action through body, speech, and mind. But you still will be reaping some vipaka, which is the fruit, the fruition of the karma, if you're doing good deeds and having good thoughts. So I would say no, it doesn't reduce it. You're still producing karma, but the vipaka will be more pleasant. The karma itself is more pleasant. The action through body, speech, and mind, if it's good, is much happier. And then the result is much happier. So, yeah, so that's all I can say about that.
Great. Thank you, Aya. And I don't know if this is a continuation of your answer before, but someone says, detachment is not the same thing as kick them out of your heart. It's very different from AI anon, detach with love, rock bottom, which is abuse. Doesn't detachment, I think maybe this is a more concrete question.
Oh, let me see.
Doesn't detachment mean not clinging, as in not grasping to the present moment? So I think they're asking on clarification of on detachment.
That's what I was saying. That being attached is hanging off. Being detached is being able to set things down, not clinging. So mentally and physically, we're able to let go, which is different than detachment of being checked out, being not caring. From Eleanor, detached with love. Kick them out of your heart. Well, there is something where you have to stand back or step away from a situation and let it take its own course, because a lot of times if we're trying to control another individual who's not behaving the way that we want them to behave, like if they're drinking, they're abusing substances. No, this is
I was pouring water.
Yeah, I'm responding to the Al-Anon. So the Al-Anon would be somebody who is a family member, or a spouse or friend, or someone whose life is impacted by somebody else's drinking. So detached with love means that you would step away from them and not try to control them. And you may, some people have to leave relationships. And so that may be traumatic for the other person, but it may be all the other person can do, because they've tried everything, or they've enabled them, or they've sabotaged them, or they've done all kinds of things trying to control the other person, but it's impossible. So the only thing that the person can do is step away, and the other person has to work out their karma themselves. And if the relationship is important enough to that person who's abusing substances, then that may be a motivation for them to clean up. But rock bottom, which is abuse. Detach with love, rock bottom, which is abuse. I don't know what if someone who reaches their bottom, and this is a term that's used for alcoholics, that means that they suffered enough. They've gotten to the bottom of their suffering. Things in their lives have gotten so terrible because of their substance abuse. People leave them. They lost their job. They lost their children. Everything is just falling apart, and that's their bottom. And some people keep falling lower and lower and lower, and they never reach their bottom. But if they reach their bottom, that means I've fallen low enough. I don't want to fall any farther. This is far enough down. So sometimes that has to happen, where somebody has to just leave. And some people don't change, and some people do. Some people, like I said earlier, I worked in alcohol and drug treatment, and met people who, they lost their marriage, they lost their job, they lost their children, and so they had nothing more to lose, so they had to lose the alcohol. and so they cleaned up, and then I've seen people a year later with big smiles on their faces that they regained a lot of what they lost. Maybe not everything, but they pulled their lives together. So I don't know about being abusive. Maybe how it's handled. If the person's cruel about the way they leave the situation. But that's, I can't really talk about that because I don't know exactly. Detach with love. I think if Al-Anon is saying detach with love, that means that they're doing it to protect themselves and for the sake of the other person, because they are interfering too much with that other person for them to be able to recover.
Okay. Thank you, Aya. John says, in the Anguttara Nikaya, there's a sutta that talks about how to deal with laziness. It advises preemptively arousing energy before doing work. Okay. Handa hang patika cheva vidyang arabhami apatassa patya anadhigatassa adhigamaya asakichatassa sachikriyaya. Do you have any experience with this practice? How to deal with laziness? Well, I could personally, if I don't know if Aya has experience, but maybe we could both briefly. I mean, personally, in terms of, sort of, before, it's kind of like, in a very mundane example, if, I'll give it, basic example. You're laying in bed and you need to do something that morning. So you're lazy. You don't want to get out of bed, right? And then you have to tell yourself, I'm going to get up. You have to get that energy to say, I'm going to get the motivation. I'm going to arouse energy. I'm going to bring my mind up. I'm going to get out of this bed and I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to do it. Before you even do it, before you start working on it, you have to generate that. And otherwise you can sit there you could lay there for hours. You can lay there all day, right? If you don't get that. I don't know if anyone has the experience, but I definitely had the experience of lounging and not arousing the energy, because you can tell yourself a story to stay, right? To not do something. It doesn't have to be in bed, but tell yourself a story not to do something. And before you do it, you have to really get that motivation. So like in my experience in safe meditation, Sometimes the mind, dullness and sleepiness is a good example because that tends to be where we get lazy. And energy is an anecdote to that. Let's say the mind is very sleepy. Sometimes we have to arouse energy and we have to say, I am going to develop alertness. I want to do this. You have to chandang janeti, the Buddha says. So that means generate enthusiasm. Chandang janeti, vayamati gives a series of verbs that are similar to this. And we have to, like this vidyang adabhami, I will generate this energy. In the right efforts, it's vidyang adabhati. So this is the same verb. So we have to generate the effort, the energy, the vigor. I'm going to do this. An example that the Buddha gives is before you sit down in meditation, you say, gladly, let my bones, sinews, and blood dry up. I will not get up from this seat until I attain awakening. And that's what the Buddha did. And it worked out pretty good for him. Some people try this and then they end up in the hospital with some broken knees. I heard a story in Thailand. There was a monk who he made this effort. He said, I'm going to get on this walking path and I will not get off this path until I am awakened. So he was walking and his feet started bleeding because it was hours and hours walking. His feet were sore, the skin broke, he started bleeding. So he got on his knees and he was crawling. And then his knees, the skin was coming off his hands. So he got down and he was on his elbows, on his thighs. He's crawling down the path and he will not give up until he's awakened. Now, the story goes that actually he was successful. And they said this was one of the only cases of someone who made this determination and actually worked. I don't know the person, so I can't say. But you could say before you start, before you really do that, you have to have, that takes a lot of energy. Because in my experience, if you don't have a strong determination, like genuinely with your whole heart, you'll give up. Like, let's say you make a determination, I'm going to sit here for 4 hours. But you really think, well, I mean, maybe, or maybe I'll get up. Then you won't sit there. You'll get up unless you continue to make that exertion. You make the determination while you're sitting and you really have that energy. So it has to be like, I really sincerely with all your heart, you can't fake it. You can't say it loudly and then it will work. You have to really with your whole heart generate the energy to say, I'm going to make this determination. I'm going to do this activity. I'm going to apply myself. Even if it's not like I'm going to attain awakening, you'd say, I'm going to try. I'm going to sit here and I'm really going to try. And in my experience, it actually, it's really important. Otherwise, you might just slip. I don't know if you have experience that you'd like to share.
I think that there's some motivation. I think this is what to motivate yourself, and for some people use something like that for the sake of all beings, I'm going to do this. I heard Bhante Sunata Vihari saying, yes, and then I'm feeling lazy, and then I think about doing this for other people, and then it brings up his energy, and he said, so there's the bringing up, what is it that brings up your energy when you're feeling lazy? Is it, oh yes, this is such a good idea to do this, and I really want to have that knowledge arising in me, and I've heard that this is the way to do it, and so I'm going to put my energy into doing this. This is exciting to me. This is interesting to me. I'm going to give it a try. So there's something that will spark your interest, spark your excitement about something. What is it that's bringing me joy? Or remembering, oh yes, that was such a good experience last time. So, or I've just made this determination, I'm going to do it. When you were talking, I thought about Ajahn Brahms, that I think it was Thailand too, they discovered in this cave that there was this monk who had died in a full lotus position, and it's like it had been there for like 10 years, like a decade, and it was just like they determined to do this, and they were still sitting there. But that may be a little bit too hard for most people to get into.
If you're feeling like you want to do this, John, you might want to assess the flexibility in your legs and your prior experience with sitting meditation.
But maybe being realistic, just saying, yes, I'm I think that helps too. I think if I say, getting up early enough, if I get up at 4, I'll have an additional hour in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like, oh, and then if I'm feeling lazy, like, and I don't get up till 4:30, I'm like, oh, that's the half an hour wasted.
Flog
I'm
yourself.
going to be, tomorrow I'm going to make more of a determination to get up.
Yeah.
And so, not flog myself, but, at least I have this half hour.
Great. So I hope that that's inspiring for you, John. I hope that you start getting up at early morning hours.
3:30.
Crack of dawn.
3:30 is actually what it used to be. 4:30 now, so we have an extra hour.
Okay.
Yeah, I get some nods in the audience. Yeah.
Suzanne says, Venerable is grateful for empty cloud. Regarding conditions and Brahma Vihara radiating practice, should one radiate comprehensively, like being a conduit, or radiate to specific conditions, like radiating metta to a person I'm with?
Do you want to answer that one? Or we both answered the last one. So I think you can do either. I think there's different ways of practicing, and the one way is starting with generating the feeling. It's actually metta is you make these auto suggestions to bring up a feeling, like, may I be happy, may I be well, bringing up a feeling of joy and happiness in yourself. And then when you it's like getting this warm glow of happiness in your own heart, and then it permeates your own body, and then that's I think what you're talking about, the radiant, to radiate outwards, so to really have a good sense internally of this metta bhavana that's can be expansive and radiate outwards to other people. You start internally cultivating it, but you can have also thoughts, of maybe once you've done that, you've had this really powerful metta that you can warm somebody that's in need of that. You can have a specific person that you want to send the metta.
I could have used that here recently when the heating wasn't working, Aya. The radiator.
That's a different practice when you're cultivating inner heat. Build the internal fire element, getting that activated. But that's different. You have to be careful with that, so you don't self-combust or something like that. Auto combustion.
Okay.
You have to just be able to
Maybe that's metta in action.
Radiate out kind of moderately, not a big point. But I think you can do both. But I think it's really good to cultivate internally first, bringing up the feeling.
Thank you, Aya. And Mary Burns says, what is the Buddhist take on war? There's so much suffering from a hatred and war. Are there special chants and blessings for peace on earth? Thanks. Well, briefly speaking, the Buddhist take on it is that it sucks. That essentially it's unwholesome activity. So actually, one of the early accounts of the Buddha's going forth, he says that, so there are accounts that talk about him seeing aging, sickness, and death, and contemplating how everything is liable to decay, and etc. And that is part of it. But there's actually another sutta where he talks about how he saw everybody fighting over territory, and they all claim it and they all possess it, and then they get it possessed and they attach and they fight and they argue and they dispute, and he's talking about political turmoil and war and land ownership. And he actually says how he saw there was no home because everybody claims a home everywhere and they fight over it, that there's actually no refuge because everything is kind of in this state of conflict and possessiveness. So one of the accounts of the Buddhas going forth is actually about how the dispassion with the world because of war and territory and fighting. So I would say that it was actually things like that that the Buddha says that led him to want to find an escape and lead other beings to realize to let go of this possessiveness. And actually, one of the teachings of the Buddha is about how possessiveness arises. So it's a very coarse form of grasping and craving. And he talks about how this phenomena of us grasping onto physical things and fighting over them in conflicts, he actually addresses conflict many places. It's clearly something that he saw as a problem. And he saw it as coming from greed, hatred, and delusion. And he also analyzed it as conditional. So he talked about how there are certain conditions within society and within our minds that give rise to this. And there's other suttas too, like the Aganya Sutta, Digha Nikaya 27. In the Aganya Sutta, the Buddha gives a story of essentially how society devolved from of beings being in a blissful state to being kind of in this possessive, war-torn, capitalist society on Earth. And kind of one of the turning points he talks about is when people start claiming land. They start claiming this is my land and this is my food. So it's a little bit more of allegorical, and it's kind of a mixture, but you can see how again and again he talks about the arising of possessiveness and conflict is a problem. Now, realistically, also the Buddha, he didn't spend his life trying to stop wars, because he spent his life trying to take out the mental roots of these types of problems and try to spread in society wholesome ways of relating to our homes and our territory and our families, and generating sila and non-harm, non-killing. Obviously, war involves violence. The Buddha didn't condone violence. But he also advised ministers and kings and things like that, because those people also could use advice, right? If we think, oh, they engage in war, so I shouldn't advise them. Well, it's only going to be worse then, right? So maybe they're still going to engage in war. And the Buddha did actually advise people who are engaged in war. And he didn't try to convince them, oh, don't do that. Because actually there's another place where the Buddha, he says he was thinking, is it possible to run a territory without, essentially without violence, like without war, without punishment, without violence? Is it possible? He was thinking about this, and he realized, no, it's actually not possible to be in charge of a nation and just completely be peaceful. And so is that pessimistic? Should we think, oh, we shouldn't, everything's going to be, it's never possible to have world peace, so therefore we shouldn't fight for it? No. But what he's saying is, like, realistically, conflicts arise because people are greedy, people have hatred, people are possessive. So he really was trying to, you could say, minimize that and try to spread good roots to the rulers and to the people, and he advocated a society that, instead of, say, capital punishment, there are suttas that talk about how people are less likely to engage in crime if they're punished, but if they actually have the resources to take care of themselves. That's actually a theme that comes up. So, like, for instance, if people are stealing and people are killing, is the solution that we should then just punish those people and make an example of them? Actually, the suttas talk about how, well, if they were provided with a stable environment, materially and also spiritually, then they wouldn't be doing those things, right? It'd be much less common. So there is talk about that. And then I hope that that's helpful. It's a big topic, and if you want to read more, there's a lot of discussion. But as far as special chants and blessings, do you know of any chants that people do, Aya, for peace, world peace?
I can't think of anything offhand other than just cultivating metta, for, and just the more we overcome, like Ayurveda was saying, that our unwholesome roots, particularly hatred, greed, hate, and delusion, the more we as individuals overcome them. It does have an impact on the world. But I think just dedicating merit, having the thoughts of compassion, we have to guard ourselves from hatred. It's a big thing. And so both the metta bhavana and the karuna, the compassion, helps overcome that. The maybe responding to a situation by anger and hatred. I don't think you're doing that, but you're feeling some amount of despair. But you can just have that wish, and that people would stop conflict in the world, and that there would be peace in the world. And there's that beautiful, there's that song, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. So you could say that as your mantra. I hope that's helpful.
So we may have to do what we have called Zen answers, Aya.
Okay.
So that's a really short,
Zen answers.
if possible,
Okay.
the Zen master
All right.
answering. So Kumu asks, what do you think about detachment while having loving kindness and detachment without aversion?
You want to answer that one, Zen Mike?
What do you think about detachment while having loving kindness and detachment without aversion? Good. Anonymous says, what is the Pali word for all of the Eightfold Path factors?
One word.
I think this can be 8 words.
Yeah. Just Majjhima Patipada.
Maybe they should look it up.
Yeah, there isn't one. There isn't one word, but that would be the shortest.
Well, I think they're asking for all the Eightfold Path factors. Like they want the Pali for each one.
Oh, each path factor. Okay, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappo, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanto, Samma Ajivo, Samma Vayamo, Samma Sati, Samma Samadhi.
Sad. And if you don't remember, then
But you can find
look
that
it up.
online.
Yeah.
That's more than a one-word answer, though.
Okay. Where did both of you ordain? Here, Empty Cloud.
No, both of us?
No, I'm answering for myself.
Oh, I ordained both my novice ordination, my seminary ordination, and my bhikkhuni ordination were at Aranya Bodhi, which is a hermitage on the Sonoma coast. It's above, if you know California at all, it's just above Jenner, California, and it's north of San Francisco, maybe 80 miles or something like that.
Okay. J.D. Smith. I wonder, what is your thoughts on Buddha nature? Regarding anatta versus our true permanent nature is actually a Buddha nature.
Oh,
That's the Zen answer. I guess briefly on this, anatta versus our true permanent nature is actually Buddha nature. So this is actually a big, long debate in Chinese Buddhism and in East Asian Buddhism, because some people thought, oh, Buddha nature, that sounds like a thing. And other people thought, oh, Buddha nature, that's the nature of all things, which is emptiness. So it's not. So there's a debate, and you'll find actually different opinions. My personal thoughts on it is that I know of Zen teachers and Chan teachers and teachers that teach Buddha nature, and they basically what they're referring to is that you could think of it as anatta. It's emptiness. So everything is empty. It's all conditioned. So already we think, oh, like I need to let go of myself or something, but actually already there is no such thing that we can find that is a permanent self. It's actually an activity that we're doing, but that activity is also conditioned. So even that activity is not. So Buddha nature is really just talking about conditionality, dependent arising, and emptiness or non-self. And that's one way of seeing it. And it's really focusing on the fact that even though everything is empty, that doesn't mean annihilation or non-existence. It's saying there's the functioning of things. This experience is happening, but it's actually completely empty.
You're not
So,
doing this then.
I hope that that's helpful.
That's it.
And Shelley Lim, hello, Venerables. If there are bugs in my home, I try to capture them to set them free outside. Sometimes I accidentally end up killing them. Is there something I can do about the guilt I feel for killing the insect and breaking the precept?
I can answer that. You're not breaking a precept if you're unintentionally killing them. If you're trying to move them outside, I know you might feel some pain, like you're feeling sympathy for the because they are sentient beings. So when we could become more sensitive, but we can just know that you're not breaking a precept. That's the main thing. If you're trying to help them by putting them out, or you're trying to avoid using things that will kill them intentionally. So I would just take care of your heart. I know there's maybe a little twinge of, oh, I didn't mean to do that, but you did the best you could.
So, okay, I think we only have a couple more, so we'll just try our best to speed through here. I struggle with what the Buddha might call inferiority conceit due to a lot of failure of my aspirations. There's pressure on me to move forward with worldly life, but I'm not sure how to proceed in a positive way that can benefit myself and others without going into great detail. I'd appreciate your advice. You're perfect just the way you are, and you could use a little work. And we just have to acknowledge that that's where we're at. We try our best to move on. And if you want more detail, then next monk chat, we'll try our best to answer in more detail. And okay. And I think, Rick, that sounds like a complex question on animals in the Dhamma. So that might be better for next monk chat.
What was it?
It's on learning and practicing the Dhamma by interacting with animals.
Oh, just be kind to them. And know that they're intelligent. They're much more intelligent than we give them credit for.
Great. And I think that's the end. There is a question that just popped up. Karma's intention, and Buddha taught his son Rahula to always evaluate intention. What are your thoughts, please? Yes, that is what the Buddha taught.
He just basically said, if any reaction through mind, speech, or body, if you evaluate it and it seems like it might be harmful to yourself or others, don't do it.
Sadhu. Thank you, Aya. And we'll close with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you all for joining us. Have a beautiful night.
And sadhu too. This one up here representing the Buddha.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.